Hi everyone, welcome to Intro to Communism Part 6. Over the past 5 videos, I've been going through a bunch of PowerPoints, and I learned why, because there's a lot of content and some images that I wanted to show you that were necessary for understanding really the Russian Revolution and looking at Lenin and Stalin's reign. In this video, I'm going to be explaining Lenin and the Bolshevik dictatorship, and largely reading a lecture to you, one of my own that I've written. It's important to understand in the context of the Russian Revolution that, broadly speaking, we're in the category of socialism, and then there are particular parties underneath socialism. So you have the socialists, and then you have the Marxists and the anarchists underneath here. The anarchists are largely, and Karl Marx runs in anarchist circles as well, but anarchists are largely debating over whether to throw the dynamite now or later, right? That's the main difference between some anarchists as to, look, we need to overthrow the government, but we need to do it today, or they disagree, no, let's do it tomorrow or in a year, or let's make some changes politically first and then, try to influence the system, etc. So that's anarchists, and then you have Marxists, and then within Marxists you have social democrats, and even within social democrats you'll eventually have anarchists coming out of there, and what are known as the economists, etc. So a whole bunch of it becomes quite complicated getting into the history of all these different parties, especially looking at the First International, Second International, Third International, etc., where Marx is present, but then later on also Lenin is, but then and then they break up, and then they don't have another one, and then blah blah blah. There's all sorts of things. One other area to cover is the spectrum in Russia at this time, where you have all the way over on the right here, if you will, you have the czarists and their hereditary monarchists, and then you have Octobrists here, they're constitutional monarchists, and then you have, if you will, the right still, it's just from this perspective, if you will, to the right, you have the KDs, they're constitutional democrats. And then, so far right are the czarists and the monarchists, right? The constitutional democrats, the KDs, and then you have full left, you have the Bolsheviks, and they're farther left and more radical than the Mensheviks, right? And then in between there, you have the SRs, the Social Revolution. So you have the Bolsheviks as far left, and you could even put the anarchists as even farther left, but you have those Bolsheviks, and that's Lenin's party right there. So the question then, in the disagreement with Lenin as a moderate in between the Mensheviks and or the Mensheviks and the anarchists, and you having the Bolsheviks, you have Lenin arguing for a moderate approach at this point to not throwing the dynamite yet, but also not just trying to influence the system and wait. We need to act now. So this is, I'm just going to begin reading through this. This is going to get into the Cheka. It's going to get into the history of the secret police and and what's called the dictatorship of the proletariat, the iron fist of the dictatorship of the proletariat. It starts with the PRMC, then it moves to the Cheka, the NKGB, the NKVD, the MGB, which eventually turns into what today is the KGB, or what we used to think as the KGB, even Putin, member of the KGB, up until 91, and what's even in existence today. We won't go there. But this is basically the Committee for State Security. Now back to Lenin. Lenin is quite clear that in order to achieve the desired Marxist, communist, and Bolshevik ends, there needs to be clear-sighted leadership and implementation of the right policies and organizations. In looking back to Engels and Marx, Lenin argues for a specific reading of how these changes will take place and will happen, and what will happen to the existing bourgeois state. In this essay, we'll be looking at what Lenin means by the withering away of the state and how this results in practice with the dictatorship of the proletariat and ultimately the Cheka, the iron fist of the proletariat. There are three aspects to examine concerning Lenin's notion of Engels' withering away of the state, and in what sense will it wither away, the role of the working class, and what exactly is the dictatorship of the proletariat. Then we will examine the PRMC and what they were doing in the early months of the Bolshevik Revolution and see how this eventually turned into the Cheka. Finally, we will look at the Red Terror and what role the Cheka had in it. Overall, the thing to note is that though the bourgeois state is overthrown, as Lenin states must happen, the dictatorship of the proletariat and the iron fist of the proletariat as the arm of the proletarian state, this part does not wither away. In fact, so far in our study of Russian political history and Marxism in general, these entities show no signs of withering away, but actually show signs of continued growth. Now, the question is going to be communists argue, and when you look at Marx and Engels' writing, it appears that this iron fist, or the dictatorship of the proletariat, the leadership class that rises up to make changes and crush the bourgeois, will it wither away? Well, the question, it actually does not wither away, all right? So the question, once we reach, if you will, a communist state, will we be seeing the state apparatus withering away? We actually never see this happen, and this is what we're going to look at. Lenin, he's going to make some distinctions for us because he is a Marxist. He claims to be a Marxist, and then he'll be giving us quotes and whatnot. So, the withering away of the state. The first thing to note concerning the withering away of the state is that, according to Lenin, Engels did not expect the bourgeois-controlled state to wither away. Lenin, in his State and Revolution, argues that Engels is saying that the bourgeois-controlled state will be abolished by the proletarian revolution, and that only after this happens, the proletarian state will wither away. So the actual state, the bourgeois state's not going to wither away. It's actually going to be crushed. And then the state that is put in its place, so that becomes a question, will it wither away? Lenin states the following, quote, "As a matter of fact, Engels speaks here of the proletarian revolution abolishing the bourgeois state, while the words about the state withering away refer to the remnants of the proletarian state after the socialist revolution." Will that even happen? We'll see that won't even happen. The confusion over what Engels meant about the withering away of the state is first found in the distinction between two different states, the bourgeois state and the proletarian state. Lenin is making the distinction to argue against both the Marxist opportunism in his day and the extreme anarchists. So talking about the SDs or the Mensheviks or the other liberal ones, or the more extreme ones of the anarchists. In implicating Engels in this way, Lenin is taking a moderate position between the two groups. The bourgeois state will not wither away, as some thought, but it actually must be abolished. Now, once again, the opportunists are those in favor of a gradual overthrow, so more this way, right? The extreme anarchists would be those in favor of throwing dynamite now, and then the withering away of the state really equals here the dictatorship of the proletariat. It then becomes the iron fist of the proletariat, and which essentially becomes the Russian secret police, the Sword and the Shield, if you will, if you want to go read that book, The Sword and the Shield, the history of the KGB, and really what we're going to see is finally that this withering away does not wither away, but actually you're only a good communist if you follow along with these methods. Okay, that's it for this one. We will pick up in the next video.